We are now reaching the final touches on our exterior project. In the previous parts, we covered the design concept, the modeling process, how to add objects and models into our scene, how to convert them to proxies, and how to use Project Manager plugin to simplify the process. After that, we have seen how to set up the lighting as a day shot and explain how to use VRay Sun with HDRIs, all the way to applying PBR materials to get photorealistic rendering. So, in this video, I will try to simplify the process of making a night shot that is colorful with eye-catching details. Keep in mind, this might be a long video format, but I will try to make it as simple as I can and I will divide it to parts. So check the video description for that. Now, let's start after the intro. Hey, what's up guys? Hope you are all doing well. Welcome to Graviton Studio. If you are new here, I do videos about architecture design and visualization to help you improve the quality of your designs. So, if you are interested, consider subscribing. Before starting, just a quick reminder. This video is part of the full exterior workshop, so if you missed the previous parts, make sure to watch them from the card above or from the link in the video description. Also, if you want to download the project files, you can find it on my Patreon page, the link in the video description. Last thing to say, I've got a lot of questions about hardware recommendations, so I collected all the best price to performance PC builds and best laptops for 3D modeling and rendering in one link. You will find all of that on my Amazon store and I will update the list from time to time, so keep checking it. There are good deals for the Black Friday and Cyber Monday, so don't miss the chance if you are looking to upgrade your hardware. Now without further ado, let's start the tutorial. Okay, so let's see what we are going to do today. This is what we have ended up with our day lighting setup, and we have achieved that by using VRay Sun with VRay HDRI. After that, we have added materials to our project, and most of them are PBR materials, and those are always will give you the best quality and the closest look to real materials. And this is the final render directly from VRay without any color corrections or post-processing, and this is after I've done a simple post-processing to it. I've just adjusted the colors a little bit and add some sharpness. So this is before post-processing or before Photoshop, and this is after Photoshop. Now let's see the steps to convert this day scene into night scene. First of all, we are going to work on our HDRIs. So we are going to replace our day HDRI with a night HDRI. And this is the result after I have added only HDRI's lighting. And this is the result with the HDRI only. So everything is barely visible. The next step is to add interior lights by using VRay light, and in this case I used sphere light, and of course we are going to see how to adjust its temperature and its brightness, etc. After that we are going to add mesh light to complete the building lightings, and it's going to mix with the interior light and give us this nice mixture between the two light temperatures. After that, the next step is to add lights to the environment, so lighting the street, lighting the trees and the other details. After that, we are going to see how to add figures to our scene, and they are animated of course, and how to adjust the shutter speed in VRay camera to get this nice motion blur effect, which will help us lately after applying the materials to get this nice light tails out of the cars. And this is how the render looks after applying all the materials and turning on all the lights. From that point, we are going to add a small little details such as environment fog, which will give us more depth to our scene, and also the glowing effect, which will appear on the brightest area in our render, such as the light tails and the windows of the building. Finally, we are going to do some post-processing in Photoshop, which will convert this render to this final shot. So this is before and this is after. So in the final result, we can see all the details, all of the nice effects of the fog and glow and lens effect. And let's compare it to the day shot, which is now looks a little bit boring compared to the night shot, because all of the lights, colors and the contrast, the additional details that we have got in our night render or night shot. So these are the steps, and now we are going to start with the first step, which is setting up our night HDRI. So let's jump back to 3ds Max. So this is what the building is look like without any other objects or lights in the scene, and I'm going to just turn on the layers of the objects, so buildings, cars, trees, you can see the cars and the figures or the people are all animated, and we are going to see how to animate them. But firstly, if you want to know how to add models to your scene, I've already done a video about this and you can check it out in the card above, which is basically how to import models to your scene and how to convert them to proxies and how to use Project Manager plugin to speed this process. Now I'm going to turn off all the layers except for the building layer to speed up the things in the viewports, and let's keep our focusing now on the lighting. So as for lighting, this is what we have ended up after setting up our lighting. For the daylight render, we have used VRay Sun with VRay HDRI. Now in the night shot, we don't need VRay Sun anymore, so you can delete it or turn it off. Now VRay Sun have gone. Our focusing now on the HDRI only. So select the VRay light dome, open the material editor, pressing M in the keyboard, and let's drag the VRay HDRI to our material slot as an instance. This is the HDRI that I'm using now. And you can get free HDRI maps from websites like No Emotion HDRIs. Scroll down until you find something interesting and you can download it for free, as simple as that. After that, go back to your HDRI maps in the material editor and just select the HDRI map that you have downloaded and click open. Of course, you have to try more than one HDRI map until you get the mode that you are looking for. And really that's it. All of the settings for the HDRI maps and the VRay light dome I've already covered in the previous videos for the lighting. You can watch it if you want to get deeply in the HDRI details and how to control it. I don't want to waste your time by repeating the same information that I've already covered. But for now, this is all the change that we are going to do, just replacing the HDRI maps with a night map. That's it for the step 1. After rendering, you will get a result like this.
Come here.
About the render setup that I'm using now for the test render, for the output size, leave it at HDTV and change the resolution up to 720, and from the VRay tab, change the global switches, activate the override material and add a simple VRay material, and change the image sampler to progressive, and for the render time, make it 0. From the GI tab, change the primary engine to a radius map and give the presets to very low. And that's it for the render setup. After that, hit render, and for this step you will get only the HDRI lights as this render or something close to this render. Now let's go to the next step, which is adding the interior lights by using VRay sphere light. So let's close the VRay frame buffer and the material slots. And now let's add VRay sphere lights. Let's go to create, lights, VRay and VRay light. Change the type from plane to sphere and drag it on the viewport. Select the light, go to modify, give it a radius of 0.1 and change the mode from color to temperature. Add 2000 value as a temperature. About the multiplier, you have to adjust it so it fits your scene. About the multiplier, it will affect on the brightness of the lights. So higher value means much light, lower value mean less light. So you have to adjust it based on the render that you are doing. So let's go back to our camera. Let's open the render setup and let's activate render hidden geometry and activate the lock icon on the VRay camera. Now close the render setup and open VRay frame buffer and let's activate the interactive rendering. Now the test render start to appear. So if we go back to the multipliers, if we increase the multiplier, let's say from 8000 to 20,000, we will see that the brightness of the interior lights has blown up, and I don't want it to be that strong, so I have to lower down the value. And this is the same principle goes to the temperature. If we increase the value of the temperature, let's say 6000, this will affect on the color of the lights, so it's appear like a white lighting. I want the light color to be close to the orange color, so it will give a nice contrast with the bluish environment. So you can give it a value like 2000 or 2500. It's a nice value that will give us a nice contrast between the colors. The last thing to do is to activate the invisible options in the options tab, so we will get only the light effects without seeing the light source. Something I want to point out, I've separated all the windows in single objects, so I can exclude them from the override materials. So let's go back to the render setup. Let's go to the VRay tab, and from the global switches, we will go to the exclude list, and you can see that I've selected the glass, which is this object, as an exclude. So all of the materials in the scene will be replaced with VRay gray material, except for the glass, which will remain in its original material. So this is something you have to pay attention to it, especially while setting up the interior lights, because we are putting the lights inside the buildings, so we want to see its effect through the glass. Okay, that's it for the interior lights. Now let's go to the next setup, which is setting up the mesh lights, or the additional light to the building, which is something really easy to set up and will give a nice touch to your scene. Now let's see how to set up our mesh light. So the first thing to do is to select the objects that you want to set the mesh light to it. So I've already selected a few and attach them to one object by using edit poly. So step 1, select the object. Step 2, go to create light, VRay light, and change the type from plane to mesh. Now go to the modify and go to mesh light, pick mesh, and now we have to select an object to convert it to a light source. So let's draw, for example, a sphere, and let's go back to the VRay light mesh and select pick mesh, pick the sphere. I didn't select the original object because I already put a VRay light to it and I can't select it now. So let's take the sphere as an example. After selecting the sphere, you will now notice that the VRay light mesh icon has disappeared because now it's applied to the sphere, and the sphere now is shown as a wireframe. Now if you select the sphere, you will notice that it's a VRay light modifier has already applied to it, and all of the settings now has become a VRay light setting. So we have the multiplier, we have the mode, color or temperature. Let's set it to temperature, and if you decrease the value of the temperature, let's say 2500, you will get this orange color, and if you get above, let's say 8500, we will get this bluish color. So let's go back to our IPR render and adjust the value based on the test render. So let's open up the VRay frame buffer. Let's activate the IPR render. Just wait a few seconds. And now we are going to adjust the VRay light setting based on what appears in the IPR render. So let's say if I increase the multiplier to 800, I will get this blown up lights, which is overexposed, and of course this value will change from scene to scene, so feel free to change it according to your project that you are working on and according to the test render. So this is the setting that I've used for this light mesh. I put the multiplier to 100, the temperature to 2500, just to give it a difference between the interior lights and the mesh light. And about the options, I leave the invisible option off, because if I turn it on, let's see in the IPR render, if we activate invisible, we are going to hide up the light source. So in this case we will end up with this gap because the original object is now disappeared. So let's turn it off. I usually use it to give a little bit touch to the scene. So that's it for the mesh light. Now let's see the other types of lights. Let's stop the IPR render and let's set up the environment lights. So the street light, the tree lights, etc. This is the mesh light after I give it a clean render, and this is the lights that we are going to set up, which is the environment lights. So let's close the frame buffer. Let's select a few objects and isolate them to see how I set up the lighting for them. So for example, this tree, I've put a VRay plane light under it and it's pointed up. so the light will hit the branches and it will show nicely in my render. And setting up a VRay plane light is very simple. Just go to create, lights, VRay, and VRay light, and it will be by default the type selected to plane. So just click and drag, and that's it. Now in the VRay light we have this indicator to show us the direction of the light, so just hit E in the keyboard to rotate the lights. Now it's pointed up, and just move it to under the objects that you want to hit it by the lights. Now position it correctly, go to modify and change the length as width so it's fit up with the objects. Change the mode from color to temperature and give it something warm like 3500. Of course, change the multiplier according to your test render. Last thing to do is to go to options and of course activate invisible. We don't need to see the light source here. Go back to the frame buffer, activate the region render to see only the changes in the specific area. Now if we increase the temperature, let's say 12,000, we will get in the render this white color, and of course if we change the multiplier to 200, we will get this overexposed lights. So keep changing it until you get something similar to the result that you want, and after you have set up one light, copy it to the rest of the objects and you will get this nice effect to all your trees in the scene. So this is the IPR render is rendering now, and this is the final result that I've got after activating all the lights in the scene. In the next step we are going to see how to add motion blur effects and animated cars and people in the scene.
What are you doing?
Let's see how to animate any object in 3ds Max, and in this case how to animate a car. So select the car, activate toggle auto key, move the slice to let's say 20 frame and move the car from point A to point B. Now turn off the auto key and turn the animation on. Now we have this car animated and moving from point A to point B in less than 1 second. Let's pause this and go back to the car. To create 1 second of animations, we have to put at least 24 frames together to make it. So let's consider 24 frame is 1 second in this case. So the car is now moving from point A to point B in 1 second. If you want to make the car move slower, then in this case we have to double the time. So let's select the car and let's change the frames from 24 up to 60, and now let's play the animation again. So we are now seeing the car is moving slower than the first time because now the time has doubled. So now instead of moving from A to B in 1 second, it's now moving the same distance in more than 2 seconds. So let's stop the animation. This means that if we want to increase the speed, we have to make it in a short time. If we want to decrease the speed, we will make it in a long time. So this is the concept number 1. Animated an object. Number 2, let's see how to add animated people easily without any plugins or any additional models. Let's go to the populate tab and let's see the options there. We have a lot of options to add animated people to our scene. The first thing is creating a flow. We can click on it and select the path for the people. Now the width of the path is controlled by the width value that we are adding here. So let's say 3. Now we will generate a path with a width 3 meters. If you selected the path and go to modify, we can control the density of the figures or the people, and if you can see these red dots and blue dots, it's representing the people. So changing the density up or down will affect on the number of the figures that we are going to create. Slow or fast, this will affect the speed of the animated figures, and also running male or female will control the number of male or female in the same path. We can make it all females, all male, or something in the middle. So let's increase the density, and after completing the setting, let's hit simulate, and that will add animated people in our scene. Here we are. Let's play the animation, and now we have all of these people that are working in our scene. Let's pause the animation, and the same thing, we can add an area, so a rectangle area, circle, or a free shape, and also control the density setting, single or group, etc. To change the resolution of the figures, just select the figure that you want and go to switch resolution and activate it. Wait for a few seconds. We now get a high resolution version of this figure. So let's change the resolution for this one also. This is the high resolution, and you can switch it back to the lower version. And for every change that you are doing, go back to simulate and activate it, so you will generate the new changes again. And by that, you can add figures to your scene in very easy way. Let's go back to our scene. So by using the same tools and concept, I've added the cars and the people to my scene. And you can see here the cars are moving very fast, but the car that's near to the camera, I made it move slower, so it will appear in my motion blur. So this car is barely visible, while the other cars, they are turned on to one single line, and they are invisible. So this is before and this is after. About the motion blur effect, you have to activate it from the camera. So let's go to our camera, selected the camera, and you can control it by activating motion blur option and lower the shutter speed to value like 10 or even lower, and by lowering the shutter speed you will get a lot of exposure, so you have to control it by increasing the value of the f number. So basically less value for the shutter speed, more value to the f number. And of course you have to test it more than once until you get the right exposure. And keep the ISO at 100 value, so don't play with the ISO, play only with the shutter speed, lower value, f number, higher value, and you will get this nice motion blur effects. So we have covered how to animate any object in 3ds Max, how to add animated figures into your scene, and how to control the motion blur effects from VRay camera. So this is what we will get after applying these changes, and let's see the render after applying the materials to it. This is what we will get after applying the materials, and I've already covered the PBR materials in 3 videos before this. We have done the wet asphalt material, we have seen the best free websites to download PBR materials from it, and how to set up PBR materials easily in 3ds Max. The only one thing that I want to point out is the VRay light material, which I have used for the car lighting. So let's go to any car, selected it, Alt and Q to isolate it. So I have added a VRay light material to the front light of the cars. I will open material editor and I will show you the VRay light material. To add a VRay light material, just open the material editor, press M on the keyboard, go to the materials, VRay light material, and drag and drop it to the material slots. Double click on it. We will get color to control the color. So in this case we are not getting a temperature to control the temperature of the light. We will only get color, and of course intensity of the color, so the intensity of the light, and we can add a map to control the light. So this is the basic material that I've added to the car lights. It's only a white material with an intensity of 500, and of course you can change the materials to any color that you want. Let's say to red, yellow, orange, etc. I've created 3 materials of these to get 3 colors, so white, yellowish and red. And after applying motion blur effects, you will get this effect of the tail light, and for the other cars that are moving very fast, you will get this long light tails and a mixture of colors, because I've used 3 light materials, white, yellow and red, so you'll get this nice mixtures of the light. So this is our render before adding materials, and this is our render after adding materials and motion blur effects. Now let's see the next step, which is adding VRay environment fog. Now let's see how to add VRay environment fog and how to control it. Firstly, open the render setup and go to the render elements. Now let's add VRay atmosphere. Okay, close the render setup. Go to the rendering environment or press 8 in the keyboard. Let's go down to atmosphere and let's add a VRay environment fog. Let's explain some of the parameters here. So the fog color will control the color of the fog. Basically it's better to leave it at white, so move the slider down to white and hit OK. Fog distance will affect the visibility of the fog. So I've set it to 250 meters. So from the camera to until 250 meters it will be visible. Fog emission, leave it always at black, but for the scatter GI, turn it on to get a more accurate result. Fog height value will affect the height of the fog. My building height here is about 25 meters. So I set it up to 30 meters, so the fog will cover all the building. Finally, for the subdivs, you can set it up to a higher value, for example 128, to get much cleaner fog. For the rest of the settings, I left it up as the default values. That's it for the VRay environment fog. Let's see the render after it finished. We will get this effect of the fog, and also in the render elements we will have VRay atmosphere, which we can use it later in the post-production. Finally, for the final render setup, you can adjust it by VRay quick setting. So go to the VRay quick setting, activate it, select the exterior setting, and from the presets change from brute force to fast and radius map plus light cache. Change the GI quality up to 25%, change the shading quality to 20%, and increase the AA quality or anti-aliasing quality to something like 40%. You can leave it at bucket, and that means you will have to wait until the render is finished, or you can change it to progressive, and in this case you can stop the render when you see the render is clear and good enough. So if you are in hurry, change it to progressive. If you have a lot of time, leave it at bucket. And that's it. Of course, this VRay quick setting will affect on the original setting. So they just made it to make the system easier. It's easier for the beginners to use the VRay settings. So if you change anything in the VRay quick setting, it will change automatically on the VRay setting. So for this final render setup, I will leave the GI quality at 50%, shading quality to 25%. I will change it from bucket to progressive. To be honest, I don't use VRay quick setting at all. But if you are a beginner, you will find it much easier to use it rather than the normal VRay setting, because you only have to select the presets, change the quality, and that's it. Don't go crazy with the quality. I think you will not need more than 50% for the GI quality and 25% for the shading quality. And work with progressive, because you can stop the render at any time when you see the render is fine. Otherwise, you have to wait until the render complete using the bucket mode. Okay, that's it for the render setup. Let's turn on all the layers, so the trees, the cars, buildings, everything. And after hitting render, of course this will take a lot of time to render, and after hours and hours of rendering in 4K resolution, this is the final result, and it's without any post-processing effect or any color adjustment. So for the final touch, I will add a lens effect. So go to lens effect icon here, activate it, and add a bloom and glare effect. Activate the bloom glare effect and change the size and the bloom value, and also you can change the intensity, let's say 2, and for the threshold let's change it to 0.2. Now hit update effects. So this is before adding the bloom effect, and this is after. Let's set the intensity back to 1, and that's it. Of course, you can test with the settings until you get something that's suitable for your scene. But basically, these are the settings. So the size, bloom, intensity, and threshold. So that's it as a final touch for this render. So the lens effect. And about the post-processing in the frame buffer, so you can add exposure and control the exposure and the contrast also, the highlight burn, etc. but I'm not going to use any of these settings because I'm going to work on this render using Photoshop. And let's say this is the final result using VRay. So let's save our render. So go to the save icon, save it as a PNG file, because PNG format will save it in a full color space format. Unlike JPG, it will compress the image. So save it as a PNG. I've already have a copy of it. And that's it. So this is our final render. And about the color corrections in Photoshop, I will make another video about that because it's a long process and it will take a lot of time, and this video is already a long video. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you do, give it a like and share it with your friends. Make sure to subscribe and activate the ring so you don't miss any upcoming video. Give me your feedbacks on this video in the comments, and if you have any other topics you want to cover for the next videos, please feel free to share your opinions in the comment section below. That's it for this video. See you in the next one. Bye.
Say it again. Say Merry Christmas.
What?